The knock at my cabin door came at 5:30 in the morning, but it wasn't human hands doing the knocking. I'd been up anyway, staring at the empty coffee cup across from mine, Ayana's cup still sitting there 4 years after she passed. When I opened that old oak door, expecting maybe a lost hiker or a ranger, what I saw made my blood run cold and my heart skip 3 beats. There stood a mother raccoon, tears streaming down her masked face like I'd never seen on any wild creature. In her mouth she carried something that made me whisper, "Well, I'll be damned." Her baby, limp as a wet dish rag, blood matting the tiny fur, not moving, not breathing right. The mama looked straight into my eyes with more human desperation than I'd seen in most people. Then she did something that 40 years of veterinary practice never prepared me for. She gently laid her dying baby right at my feet and stepped back, waiting. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 6 months earlier, I'd been sitting on this same porch, reading a letter that cut deeper than any scalpel I'd ever held. Shania's handwriting, neat as always, delivering words that felt like nails in a coffin. "Daddy, I've made my decision. You will not see Coda. Not after what you did to Mama. Some things can't be forgiven." I'd folded that letter real careful-like, the way you handle something poisonous, and set it on the little table next to Ayana's rocking chair. That's when I first saw her, this raccoon mama, belly round with babies, standing at the edge of my property like she was asking permission to stay. "Well, hello there, little mama," I'd said, my voice sounding strange after days of talking to nobody but Ayana's photograph. The raccoon tilted her head, and I swear she understood every word. "Looks like we both know something about being alone." That evening, I'd put out some of Ayana's old crackers, the ones I couldn't bring myself to throw away, and watched this expectant mother eat like she hadn't had a decent meal in weeks. Made me think of Ayana when she was carrying Shania, how she'd get that same hungry, protective look. "You know," I told the raccoon, settling into Ayana's chair, "my wife used to say that family ain't just blood. Sometimes it's who shows up when you need 'em most." The raccoon looked up at me with those intelligent dark eyes, crumbs still on her whiskers. Every evening for weeks, she'd come back. I started calling her Spirit, on account of how she seemed to appear and disappear like something not quite of this world. We'd sit together in comfortable silence, her munching crackers, me sipping coffee from my cup while Ayana's stayed empty. One night, I found myself talking to Spirit the way I used to talk to Ayana. "I made a promise, to my wife. At the end, when the pain got too much, she asked me to help her go peaceful-like. So I did what any man who loves his woman would do." Spirit just listened, no judgment in those dark eyes. But my daughter, she saw it different. Saw it as murder instead of mercy. "Been 4 years now, and she won't let me see my grandson. Says I can't be trusted around the people she loves." Spirit finished her crackers and waddled closer, settling down near my boots. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't feel completely alone. "Funny thing is," I whispered to her, "sometimes the family that finds you is better than the family that leaves you." Looking back now, I think Spirit was preparing me for something, teaching an old fool like me that love sometimes comes in the most unexpected packages. Standing there at my doorstep with Spirit's dying baby at my feet, my hands started shaking like autumn leaves. The little one's breathing was so shallow, I had to lean down close just to see his tiny chest moving. Head trauma, that much was clear. Probably got clipped by a car on the mountain road. His left hind leg bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. "Easy now, little fighter," I whispered, scooping him up in my old flannel shirt. He couldn't have weighed more than a pound, all fur and fragile bones. Spirit watched every move I made, her eyes never leaving her baby. Smart mama, she knew I was her only shot. Inside the cabin, I cleared off Ayana's old sewing table and laid him down gentle as I could. The morning light, streaming through the kitchen window, showed the damage clearer. Skull fracture, possible internal bleeding, and that leg was definitely broken. In my practicing days, I would have had this little one in surgery within the hour. But those days were long gone. My hands found their way to the phone almost by memory. Dr. Chenoa Blackfeather, young Navajo woman who'd taken over most of my old clients after I lost my license. Good heart, steady hands, reminded me of myself 40 years ago. "Doc, it's Ezra," I said when she picked up on the third ring. "Ezra Whitehawk. Lord have mercy, it's been near 2 years since you called. What's got you reaching out?" "I got a situation here, Chenoa. Little Raccoon kit, bad head trauma, broken leg. His mama brought him to me." Long pause on the other end. "Ezra, you know you can't practice anymore. The state board was clear about that. This ain't about practice, Doc. This is about doing what's right. You taught me that. Or maybe I taught you. Either way, this little one's gonna die without help." I could hear her sigh through the phone. "What do you need?" "Pain medication, some proper splinting material, maybe some antibiotics if you got 'em." "I'll pay whatever it costs. Ezra, if the board finds out I'm supplying you with veterinary medications—" "They won't. You have my word. Besides, last I checked, there ain't no law against being neighborly." Another pause. "I'll be there in an hour. Don't do anything stupid until I arrive." After I hung up, I turned back to the little patient. His breathing had steadied some, but he was still unconscious. I'd seen enough head injuries to know the next few hours would tell the tale. Outside, Spirit pressed her nose against the window, watching. "Your mama's worried sick about you, little man," I told him, gently checking his pupils with a penlight. "But she chose the right place to bring you. Don't know why, but she trusts this old fool." That's when it hit me. The same crushing weight I'd felt 4 years ago when Ayana lay dying in our bedroom. That helpless feeling of watching something precious slip away while you stood there with all your knowledge and training, knowing it might not be enough. My hands moved on their own, muscle memory from 4 decades of emergency calls. I found an old shoebox, lined it with one of Ayana's soft scarves, and made a proper nest. Filled a hot water bottle, not too hot, and tucked it under the scarf. Basic first aid for shock and hypothermia. The glucose came next, mixed with warm water in a tiny syringe I found in my old medical kit. Just a few drops on his tongue every 10 minutes. His little pink tongue moved slightly, a good sign. Brain function still there. "Come on now, little warrior," I whispered, using the same tone I'd used with Ayana during her treatments. "Your mama didn't walk all this way just to watch you give up." Spirit had moved to the front door and was making soft chittering sounds. I opened it a crack and she looked up at me with those intelligent eyes. "He's holding on, Mama. Doc's coming to help. You did good bringing him here." She tilted her head like she understood every word, then settled down on the porch to wait. The trust in that simple gesture nearly broke my heart. When was the last time anyone had trusted me with something precious? Dr. Chenoa arrived in her old pickup, medical bag in hand and questions in her eyes. She was younger than Shania, but she had that same no-nonsense look my daughter used to get when she was determined about something. "Let me see him," she said, washing her hands in my kitchen sink. I stepped back and watched her examine the kit with gentle, practiced hands. She checked his reflexes, listened to his heart, felt along his skull with fingertips that knew exactly what they were looking for. Concussion, definitely. The skull fracture's not as bad as it looks. Hairline not displaced. This leg, though, she manipulated the broken limb carefully. Clean break. "We can set it. What are his chances, Doc? In a proper clinic? 60-40? Here with limited supplies?" She looked at me with something that might have been respect. Depends on the doctor. I ain't a doctor anymore, Chenoa. You know that. License doesn't make the doctor, Ezra. Heart does. And from what I can see, your heart's working just fine. She showed me how to splint the leg properly, gave me antibiotics and pain medication, explained the feeding schedule. Professional consultation, she called it, just neighbors helping neighbors. Keep him warm, quiet, and watch for seizures. If he makes it through the next 48 hours, he's got a real chance. After she left, I sat beside that little fighter all evening, checking his breathing, giving him glucose drops, talking to him the way I used to talk to Ayanna during her bad nights. You know, little man, your mama chose to trust me with the most important thing in her world. Can't remember the last time anyone did that. I stroked his tiny head with one finger. Maybe that means something. Maybe that means I still got some fight left in these old hands. Outside, Spirit maintained her vigil, and I realized we were both keeping watch over the same precious life. For the first time in 4 years, I felt like I had a purpose again. 4 years ago, on a night when autumn rain drummed against our bedroom windows like fingers tapping out a funeral march, I held my wife's hand and made the hardest decision of my life. Ayanna lay propped up on pillows I'd arranged and rearranged a dozen times, trying to find some position that might ease her suffering. The morphine wasn't working anymore. Nothing was working anymore. "Ezra, honey," she whispered, her voice barely stronger than the wind outside. "You know what I asked you to do?" I did know. We'd talked about it months earlier, when the doctors first said the word terminal. Ayanna had made me promise. If the pain got too much, if there was no hope left, I wouldn't let her suffer. She'd seen what cancer did to her own mother, the long, agonizing decline that robbed dignity along with life. "Promise me, you won't let me suffer, honey," she'd said that day, gripping my hands with surprising strength. "You're a doctor. You know how to make the pain stop." "I promise, my love. I promise." But promising in the abstract and doing in reality were two different animals entirely. That night, with Shania asleep in the guest room and the house quiet except for Ayanna's labored breathing, I sat in the chair beside our bed and stared at the syringe I'd prepared. Morphine. Enough to let her slip away, peaceful-like. No more struggle, no more pain. "Lord help me," I whispered into the darkness. 40 years saving lives, and the one life that matters most. My voice broke. "Ayanna, forgive me for what I'm about to do. Forgive me for what I can't do." Her eyes found mine in the dim lamplight. Still beautiful, still the same warm brown that had captured my heart 38 years earlier at the Cherokee Nation gathering. "Ezra, you ain't doing anything wrong. You're setting me free. But Shania will understand someday. When she's got someone she loves more than her own breath, she'll understand." Ayanna's fingers traced my cheek, wiping away tears I didn't realize were falling. "This ain't about dying, honey. This is about how we choose to love." I kissed her forehead, tasting salt and the faint scent of the lavender soap she'd used for decades. "I love you, Ayanna Whitehawk. Always have. Always will. And I love you, Ezra Stone, in this life and whatever comes after." The injection took less than a minute to prepare. I'd done it hundreds of times for suffering animals, but my hands had never shaken like this. Ayanna watched me with calm eyes. No fear, just trust. Complete, absolute trust. "You sure about this, my love?" "I'm sure. I'm ready to go home." The needle slipped in smooth as silk. Ayanna squeezed my hand one last time, smiled that radiant smile that had lit up my world for nearly 4 decades, and closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed, deepened, and then stopped altogether. Peaceful as a sunset. I held her for another hour, memorizing the weight of her in my arms, the way her gray hair still smelled like lavender, how young she looked with the pain lines smoothed away from her face. When I finally let go, I kissed her one last time and whispered, "Until we meet again, my heart." That's when Shania's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Daddy, what did you do?" She stood in the doorway, eyes wide with horror, staring at the empty syringe that had slipped from my fingers onto the bedside table. My daughter, my brilliant, passionate daughter who'd inherited her mother's fierce heart and stubborn streak, took in the scene and understood immediately. "You killed her." The words came out flat, emotionless. "You killed Mama." "Shania, baby girl, let me explain. Don't you dare call me baby girl." She stepped into the room, her hands clenched into fists. "You murdered my mother." "I set her free, Shania, just like she asked. Just like she begged me to do." "That's not your choice to make. That's not anyone's choice to make." "It was her choice. She made me promise." "I don't care what she made you promise." Shania's voice rose to a shout. "She was sick, she was in pain, she wasn't thinking clearly." "Your mama was thinking clearer than she had in months. She knew what she wanted." "What she wanted?" Shania laughed, but it was an ugly sound, full of rage and heartbreak. "She wanted to live, Daddy. She wanted to see her grandchildren grow up. She wanted to grow old with you." She was in agony, Shania. Every breath was torture. "You didn't see." "I saw plenty. I saw my mother fighting to stay with us, and I saw my father give up on her." I tried to reach for her, but she stepped back like I was something dangerous. "I didn't give up on her. I loved her enough to let her go." "You loved her enough to kill her, you mean?" Shania's voice dropped to a whisper, which somehow hurt worse than the shouting. "I will never forgive you for this, Daddy. Never. And I will never, ever let you near any children I might have. Because if you could kill the woman you claim to love, what would you do to someone you love less?" She left that night and never came back. Moved to Atlanta, changed her phone number, returned my letters unopened. When Coda was born 2 years later, I only found out through Ayanna's sister, and when I tried to visit, tried to explain, Shania's lawyer made it clear that I wasn't welcome. "My client has made her position clear," the young man in the expensive suit told me. "Any further attempts at contact will result in a restraining order." So I stopped trying, stopped calling, stopped writing, stopped hoping. I reported myself to the state veterinary board, told them exactly what I'd done and why. They revoked my license, of course. Euthanasia of humans, even at their request, even out of love, was still illegal. I understood their position. I just couldn't bring myself to care. That's how I ended up alone in this cabin, talking to photographs and keeping Ayanna's coffee cup on the table like she might walk through the door any minute. 4 years of carrying guilt heavier than mountains, wondering if I was a murderer or a mercy giver, if love sometimes required breaking every rule you'd ever followed. Now, sitting beside this tiny raccoon kit, watching his shallow breathing and thinking about the trust his mama had placed in me, I couldn't help but wonder if this was some kind of second chance, a chance to save a life instead of ending one, a chance to prove that these old hands still had healing in them, not just sorrow. "What do you think, little fighter?" I whispered to the unconscious kit. "Think an old fool like me deserves another shot at doing right?" Outside, Spirit maintained her vigil, and I thought about the parallels. 2 mothers, both facing the possibility of losing what they loved most. The difference was, this time, maybe I could actually help. The sound of a car engine cutting through the mountain silence on day 3 made my heart jump like a spooked deer. I was sitting beside Bandit. That's what I'd started calling the little fighter, giving him his afternoon glucose when I heard tires crunching on the gravel drive. Through the window, I watched a silver SUV with Georgia plates pull up next to my old pickup. "Well, I'll be damned," I whispered, recognizing the determined set of shoulders as the driver's door opened. Shania. 4 years. 4 long years of silence, and now she was here, standing in my driveway like some kind of mirage. But she wasn't alone. A small figure climbed out of the passenger side, a boy with dark hair and serious eyes, maybe 10 years old. My grandson, Coda. I set Bandit back in his makeshift nest and walked to the front door on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Shania looked older, tired around the edges, but still beautiful like her mama. She wore a pressed blouse and jeans that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. City clothes. City life had been good to her, at least on the surface. "Hello, Daddy." Her voice carried no warmth, just the kind of politeness you'd use with a stranger. "Shania? Baby girl." I caught myself, remembering the last time I'd used that phrase and how it had cut her. "Shania, you came. Don't read too much into it." She glanced back at the boy who stood frozen beside the car like he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. "This isn't a social call." Coda was smaller than I'd expected, with Ayana's expressive eyes and something fragile about the way he held himself. He kept looking around like he was memorizing everything, the cabin, the trees, me. When our eyes met, he didn't look away, just studied me with an intensity that reminded me painfully of his grandmother. "Is that him?" Shania asked, nodding toward the window where Bandit's box was visible. "The raccoon? His name's Bandit. His mama brought him to me 3 days ago." I watched Coda's face light up with interest. "He was hurt pretty bad, but he's a fighter. Can I see him?" The boy's voice was soft, careful, like he wasn't used to asking for things. Shania's hand shot out to grab his shoulder. "Coda, remember what we talked about. Don't touch anything." "It's all right," I said. "He's been through worse than curious hands." I led them inside, acutely aware of how the cabin must look to Shania's city eyes. Dusty, cluttered with memories, probably smelling like old coffee and loneliness. Ayana's chair still sat exactly where she'd left it, her reading glasses on the side table like she'd just stepped out for a minute. Coda went straight to Bandit's box, drawn like iron to a magnet. The little raccoon was awake, dark eyes bright and alert for the first time since his arrival. When he saw the boy, Bandit actually tried to sit up, which was more movement than I'd seen from him all week. "Hey there, little guy," Coda whispered, and something in his voice made my chest tight. It was the same gentle tone Ayana used to use with hurt animals. "Coda, step back," Shania commanded. "We talked about this." But the boy didn't move. Instead, he slowly extended one finger toward Bandit, who sniffed it carefully before giving it the tiniest lick. Coda's face broke into the first real smile I'd seen since they arrived. "He likes me," he said, wonder filling his voice. "Of course he does," I found myself saying. "Animals know good people when they see them." Shania's sharp intake of breath reminded me that we weren't here for a heartwarming reunion. "Coda, come away from there, now." "But Mama." "Now, Coda." The boy reluctantly stepped back, but his eyes never left Bandit. And Bandit, bless his little heart, kept watching Coda like he'd found something he'd been looking for his whole short life. "We need to talk," Shania said. "Privately." I nodded toward the kitchen, but kept one eye on Coda, who'd settled cross-legged on the floor beside Bandit's box. The moment we were out of earshot, Shania's careful composure cracked. "Well, well, look who's playing doctor again." The words hit like a slap. "Shania, I know what you think. Don't you dare try to explain yourself to me." She crossed her arms, and I could see so much of Ayana in the gesture it made my heart ache. "I'm here for one reason, and one reason only." "What reason?" "Coda needs help." The kind of help I can't give him." Her voice cracked slightly. "The kind Mama used to give before you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "What kind of help?" Shania looked back toward the living room where I could hear Coda talking softly to Bandit. "He hasn't spoken to anyone except me in over 2 years. Won't go to school, won't play with other kids, has panic attacks if I try to leave him with a sitter. The doctors say he needs animal therapy, but every program we've tried has failed." What happened 2 years ago? His father left. The words came out bitter. Just up and decided he didn't want the responsibility of a broken child. Used those exact words in the divorce papers. I felt anger rise in my chest like floodwater. That boy ain't broken. Try telling that to every specialist in Atlanta. They've got labels for everything: selective mutism, anxiety disorder, attachment issues. But none of their fancy treatments work. She wiped her eyes roughly. Then last week I was at my wit's end, and I remembered something Mama used to say about how you could heal anything with patience and love. Your Mama was a wise woman. Don't. Shania held up a hand. Don't you dare talk about Mama like you have any right to her memory. We stood there in painful silence until Coda's voice drifted in from the other room. Grandpa? Is that what I should call you? My heart stopped. Shania's eyes went wide. Neither of us had told him who I was, but somehow this brilliant boy had figured it out. Coda, Shania called, her voice strained. Come here, baby. But, Mama, Bandit's trying to tell me something. I think he's lonely. Shania and I looked at each other, and for just a moment, 4 years of anger and hurt fell away. We were just 2 people who loved the same little boy and wanted what was best for him. How long has it been since he talked to anyone besides you? I asked quietly. 18 months? The child psychologist said forcing interaction would make it worse. I walked back into the living room, where Coda was indeed having what looked like a one-sided conversation with Bandit. The raccoon was sitting up now, more alert than I'd seen him since his arrival, chittering softly in response to the boy's whispers. What's he telling you? I asked, settling down on the floor beside my grandson. Coda looked up at me with those serious eyes. He says his mama's worried about him, and he's scared because everything hurts. Well, that makes sense. He's been through a lot. Are you really my grandpa? The question hung in the air like smoke. I could feel Shania's tension from across the room, but Coda deserved honesty. I am your mama's daddy, which makes you the most precious thing in my world, even if I'm just meeting you now. Coda considered this seriously. Mama says you did something bad. I did. I made a choice that hurt your mama very much, and I've been sorry about it every day since. Did you mean to hurt her? No, son. I was trying to help someone else, but I ended up hurting your mama instead. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, even when they're trying to do the right thing. Coda nodded like this made perfect sense to him. Then he reached out and touched Bandit again, and the little raccoon actually tried to climb into his palm. I think Bandit needs us, he said simply. Just like I need him. That's when I heard it. The sound that made my chest tighten and my eyes burn. Shania was crying. Soft, quiet tears, but tears nonetheless. Because her son had just spoken more words to a stranger than he had to anyone except her in 2 years. And maybe, just maybe, we'd all found something we'd been looking for. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning that started peaceful as Sunday church, everything went sideways faster than a greased pig at a county fair. I was out on the porch with my second cup of coffee, watching Coda teach Bandit how to stack wooden blocks, a sight that still made my heart sing every time I witnessed it, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a government vehicle crunching up my gravel drive. The white Ford Explorer had official plates and the kind of purposeful way of moving that meant business. Bad business, most likely. Behind the wheel sat a man in his 50s wearing a crisp uniform shirt and the stone-faced expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else but here. "Coda, take Bandit inside," I said quietly. The boy looked up at me with those intelligent eyes and must have read something in my face because he scooped up the raccoon without argument and disappeared through the cabin door. Agent Samuel Redwing stepped out of his vehicle like he was walking into a gunfight. Native features, probably Lakota or Dakota by the look of him, with graying hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and shoulders that said he'd been carrying the weight of unpopular decisions for a long time. "Mr. Ezra Whitehawk?" His voice was professional, polite, and cold as January creek water. "That'd be me. Agent Samuel Redwing, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I understand you have a raccoon on your property." "Might be I do, might be I don't. Depends on why you're asking." He pulled out a clipboard thick with official-looking papers. "Mr. Whitehawk, I'm going to be straight with you because I respect what you used to do for a living. We've received multiple reports about you harboring a wild raccoon without proper permits. That's a federal violation under the Lacey Act, punishable by up to $15,000 in fines and 6 months in federal prison." "Multiple reports, you say?" I kept my voice level, but inside I was thinking about which of my neighbors might have turned me in. Funny how folks got so much time to worry about other people's business these days. "Mr. Whitehawk, I know your situation. Lost your license 4 years ago under difficult circumstances. I can understand wanting to help an injured animal, but the law is clear. Wild animals belong in the wild or in licensed facilities, not in people's homes." That's when Shania appeared in the doorway, holding Coda's hand. My daughter looked like she was ready to fight a grizzly bear with a fly swatter if it meant protecting her son. "Excuse me, officer," she said, stepping onto the porch, "but what exactly is the problem here?" Agent Redwing's expression softened slightly when he saw Coda. Kids had that effect on most decent people. "Ma'am, your father is in violation of federal wildlife protection laws. I'm here to confiscate the animal and issue citations." "Confiscate?" Coda's voice came out small and scared. "You can't take Bandit? He needs us." "Son, I understand you've gotten attached." "No!" The word exploded out of Coda like he'd been holding it back for years. "You don't understand anything. Bandit is my friend. He's family." I'd never seen my grandson have what Shania called a meltdown, but I recognized the signs immediately. His whole body started shaking, his breathing got shallow and fast, and his eyes went wide with panic. It was the same look animals get when they're cornered with no way out. "Coda, baby, calm down," Shania said, but her voice was strained with her own fear. "They can't take him, Mama. They can't. I won't let them." Coda broke away from his mother and ran into the cabin. A few seconds later, we heard the unmistakable sound of a bedroom door slamming. Agent Redwing looked genuinely troubled. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "My son has severe anxiety and attachment issues," Shania said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "That raccoon is the first living thing besides me that he's connected with in over 2 years. Taking Bandit away from him would be—" She struggled for words. "It would destroy him. Ma'am, I understand this is difficult, but I have a job to do. Wild animals aren't pets. They can carry diseases, they can become aggressive, and they belong in their natural habitat." "That raccoon was dying when he came here," I said. "His mama brought him to me because she knew I could help." "You want to tell me that was wrong?" "What was wrong was not calling the proper authorities immediately. There are licensed wildlife rehabilitators who could have handled this situation legally. Nearest one's 3 hours away in Knoxville." "That little one would have been dead before we got him in the truck." From inside the cabin came the sound of muffled crying and what sounded like furniture being moved around. Coda was barricading himself in, probably with Bandit clutched to his chest. "Look, Agent Redwing," Shania said, and I could hear her trying to keep her voice reasonable. What if we apply for the proper permits? What if we do whatever paperwork is necessary to make this legal? Ma'am, permits for keeping wild raccoons as pets don't exist. The animal needs to be transferred to a licensed facility for evaluation and eventual release back to the wild. And what if he can't be released? I asked. What if his injuries mean he can't survive on his own? Then he'll live out his life in a sanctuary or educational facility. It's the best outcome for everyone involved. Everyone except my grandson. Agent Redwing looked toward the cabin, where Coda's crying had escalated to full-blown sobbing. His professional demeanor cracked just a little. Mr. Whitehawk, I have a grandson too. 10 years old, just like your boy in there. I hate this part of my job more than you know. Then don't do it. It's not that simple. The law is the law, and I took an oath to enforce it. Sometimes the law and what's right ain't the same thing, I said. Maybe not, but it's what we've got. He pulled out a formal-looking document. I'm serving you with a citation and a seizure order. You have 48 hours to turn over the animal voluntarily, or I'll be back with a warrant and backup officers. Shania stepped forward, and for a moment she looked so much like her mother that it took my breath away. Agent Redwing, I'm a social worker in Atlanta. I've seen what happens to traumatized children when their support systems are suddenly removed. My son is finally healing, finally talking again, and you want to destroy that progress for the sake of bureaucratic paperwork? Ma'am, I wish there was another way. There is another way. You could choose not to file that report. You could choose to see a little boy who's finally found something to love instead of a violation of federal statute. Agent Redwing looked genuinely pained. I've already filed the report. My supervisor knows I'm here. If I don't follow through, it's my job on the line. From inside came a crash, followed by more crying. Then Coda's voice, muffled but audible. Bandit, don't be scared. I won't let them hurt you. 48 hours, Agent Redwing repeated, but his heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. I'm sorry, folks. I truly am. After he left, Shania and I stood on the porch in heavy silence. The morning had turned gray and overcast, matching the mood that had settled over all of us like a funeral shroud. What are we going to do? She asked finally. I don't know, baby girl. I honestly don't know. Don't call me that. Sorry, old habit. From inside, Coda's crying had quieted to occasional sniffles, but he still hadn't come out of the bedroom. I could picture him in there, probably sitting on the floor with Bandit in his lap, both of them confused and scared about what was happening. This is my fault, I said. I should have found a way to make it legal from the beginning. No. Shania's voice was firm. This is the fault of a system that cares more about regulations than people, more about rules than healing. It was the first time in 4 years that my daughter had defended me about anything. Under different circumstances, it might have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like we were all losing something precious, and there wasn't a damn thing any of us could do to stop it. 48 hours, Shania repeated quietly. What can we do in 48 hours? I looked toward the cabin, thinking about the little boy inside who'd finally found his voice again, and the small raccoon who'd given it back to him. I don't know, I admitted, but we're sure as hell going to try something. That night, as the deadline hung over us like a storm cloud ready to burst, Spirit came home to die. I was sitting on the porch at near midnight, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold hours ago, and trying to figure out how to explain to a 10-year-old boy that sometimes the world just takes away the things you love most. The moon was dark, and the only light came from the cabin windows where Shania had finally convinced Coda to try to get some sleep. The sound of rustling in the underbrush made me look up, expecting maybe a deer or another raccoon drawn by the scent of the food I'd been putting out. What I saw instead made my heart break clean in two. Spirit emerged from the tree line, moving slow and unsteady like an old woman walking to her own funeral. Even in the dim porch light, I could see she'd lost weight, a lot of weight. Her fur had lost its shine, and she moved with the careful, painful gait of someone trying not to show how much everything hurt. "Hey there, Mama," I whispered, setting down my coffee cup. "Come to check on your boy?" She looked up at me with those intelligent dark eyes, and I saw something in them that nearly knocked the breath out of me. It was the same look Ayana had given me near the end. That mix of love, acceptance, and quiet desperation that said she knew what was coming but wanted just a little more time. Spirit made her way slowly up the porch steps, each one seeming to cost her considerable effort. When she reached the top, she settled down near my feet with a soft grunt that sounded almost human. That's when I got a good look at her in the light, and my veterinary training kicked in automatically. Enlarged lymph nodes in her neck, labored breathing, the distinctive smell that every animal doctor learns to recognize but hopes never to encounter. Cancer, advanced stage from the look of things. "Oh, Mama," I breathed, reaching out slowly to stroke her head. She didn't pull away, which told me more about her condition than any X-ray could have. A healthy raccoon would never let a human touch her so easily. "How long you been fighting this battle?" She closed her eyes under my gentle touch, and I felt the tremor in her small body. She was dying. Had probably been dying for weeks, maybe months. All this time she'd been caring for Bandit, bringing him food, teaching him to survive. She'd been fighting a war inside her own body. "That's why you brought him to me, isn't it? You knew you couldn't take care of him much longer." As if summoned by some instinct only animals understand, the cabin door opened quietly and Coda appeared in his pajamas, Bandit cradled carefully in his arms. The little raccoon had been doing well enough to move around more, though he still tired easily, and his left leg would always have a slight limp. "Grandpa?" Coda whispered. "I heard something." When he saw Spirit on the porch, his face lit up with recognition and joy. "Bandit, look! It's your mama!" But as he got closer, that joy dimmed. Even a 10-year-old could see that something was terribly wrong. Spirit lifted her head when she saw her son, made a soft, chittering sound that spoke of love and goodbye. "Is she sick, Grandpa?" I looked at my grandson, this brave, sensitive boy who'd already been through so much, and decided he deserved the truth. "Yeah, son, she's very sick." Coda sat down carefully beside me, still holding Bandit. The little raccoon seemed to understand what was happening better than any of us. He made soft, urgent sounds and tried to reach toward his mother, but he was still too weak to make the journey on his own. "Put him down next to her," I suggested gently. Coda carefully placed Bandit on the porch boards between his mother and us. Spirit immediately began grooming him, licking his fur and nuzzling him with the fierce, desperate love of a mother who knows her time is running out. Bandit pressed close to her, making small sounds that broke my heart. "What's going to happen to her?" Coda asked, his voice small and scared. Before I could answer, the porch door opened again and Shania stepped out, drawn by the sound of voices. She took in the scene, her father, her son, and the reunited raccoon family. And I saw understanding dawn in her eyes. As a social worker, she'd seen enough suffering to recognize it in any species. "Oh no," she whispered, settling down on the other side of Coda. "How bad?" "Bad," I admitted. "Days, maybe hours." We sat there in silence, 3 generations of Whitehawks watching a mother say goodbye to her child. The parallel to our own family wasn't lost on any of us, especially when Spirit looked up at me with those dying eyes and seemed to nod as if she was placing her son in my care one final time. "Grandpa," Coda said after a while, "what happens when animals die? Do they go to heaven, like people?" It was Shania who answered, her voice soft with memory. Your great-grandmother Ayana used to say that all creatures with the capacity to love have souls, and souls don't just disappear. They find new ways to watch over the ones they care about. I looked at my daughter in surprise. It had been 4 years since she'd mentioned her mother without anger. Is that what you believe, Mama? Shania was quiet for a long moment, stroking Spirit's head with gentle fingers. I think love is stronger than death, and what we do for each other out of love, that matters forever. Spirit's breathing was getting more labored. Each rise and fall of her small chest seemed to take enormous effort. Bandit sensed it too. He pressed closer to his mother, as if trying to share his warmth, his strength, his life. What can we do for her? Coda asked. It was the question I'd been dreading. As a veterinarian, I knew exactly what needed to be done. Spirit was suffering, and there was only one way to end that suffering mercifully. But as a man who'd lost his license and his daughter's respect for making that same choice 4 years ago, I didn't know if I had the right. Grandpa? Coda's voice was insistent. We have to help her. I looked at Spirit, then at Bandit pressed against her side, then at my grandson's earnest face. Coda, sometimes helping means letting go. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is make sure someone doesn't hurt anymore. You mean like you did for great-grandmother Ayana? The words hit the porch like a lightning strike. Shania's intake of breath was sharp and audible. I stared at my grandson, wondering how a 10-year-old could understand something that had torn our family apart. How do you know about that? Mama told me. She said you helped great-grandmother go to heaven when she was too sick to get better. She said some people thought that was wrong, but she was starting to think maybe it was the most loving thing anyone could do. I looked at Shania, seeing tears streaming down her face in the porch light. Shania? I've been thinking about it, she whispered. For months, actually. Ever since Coda got so sick with worry and fear that he stopped talking, I kept thinking about what Mama would have wanted, about what real love looks like. And I think maybe loving someone sometimes means making the hardest choice possible, even if other people don't understand, even if it breaks your heart. Spirit made a small sound, barely audible, and we all looked down at her. Her breathing was becoming irregular, painful to watch. Bandit was chittering softly, as if trying to comfort her. What do we need to do? Shania asked quietly. I had the supplies in my old medical kit. Still had some medications left from my practicing days. It would be gentle, peaceful, just like with Ayana. No more struggle, no more pain. Are you sure? I asked my daughter. Because once we do this, there's no taking it back. I'm sure, Daddy. It's time. Coda looked up at both of us with those wise, sad eyes. Can I stay with them? If you want to, son. I want to. Bandit shouldn't be alone when his mama goes to heaven. So we did it together, 3 generations united in an act of mercy. I prepared the injection while Shania held Coda, who held Bandit close to his dying mother. Spirit looked at each of us in turn, and I swear she nodded again. Permission, gratitude, trust. The injection was quick and gentle. Spirit closed her eyes, pressed her nose to Bandit one last time, and simply stopped breathing. Peaceful as a sunset, just like Ayana. We buried her at dawn under the old oak tree behind the cabin, with Bandit watching from Coda's arms and all of us crying without shame. As I shoveled the last bit of earth over her grave, Shania put her hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Daddy, she whispered. I'm sorry it took me 4 years to understand. You understand now, I said. That's what matters. Looking back, I think that's when our real healing began. Not with Spirit's death, but with the choice we made together to let love guide us instead of fear. Even knowing that in just a few hours, Agent Redwing would return to take Bandit away from us. Some battles you win by fighting, others you win by choosing what's worth fighting for. The 48 hours were up at noon on Thursday, and Agent Redwing arrived precisely on time, his white Explorer crunching up the gravel drive like the sound of inevitability itself. But this time, he wasn't alone. Dr. Chenoa Blackfeather sat in the passenger seat, and behind them came two more vehicles, one carrying what looked like other fish and wildlife agents, and the other an unmarked sedan that had government supervisor written all over it. I was sitting on the porch with Coda and Bandit, having what we all knew might be our last morning together. Shania was inside making phone calls, to lawyers, to wildlife advocacy groups, to anyone who might be able to help us fight this thing. We'd spent the past 2 days exploring every legal avenue we could think of, but the law was clear and unforgiving. "Looks like they brought the cavalry," I told Coda, who was teaching Bandit to stack small stones in careful towers. The little raccoon had developed an almost human-like fascination with puzzles and building games, which Dr. Chenoa said was a sign of exceptional intelligence for his species. "Are they going to take Bandit away?" Coda asked, not looking up from his stones. "They're going to try, son. What if we said no? Then they'd take him anyway, and probably put your old grandpa in jail to boot." Coda considered this seriously. "Would jail be very bad?" "Not as bad as watching them take Bandit from you." Agent Redwing approached the porch with reluctance written all over his face. Behind him, a woman in an expensive suit and the bearing of someone used to being the most important person in any room stepped forward. "Mr. Whitehawk, I'm Director Patricia Hawkins, Regional Supervisor for Fish and Wildlife Services. Agent Redwing has briefed me on your situation." "Ma'am?" I stood up, keeping Coda and Bandit slightly behind me. "I don't suppose you've come to tell us you've changed your minds about this." "Actually, Mr. Whitehawk, that's exactly why I'm here." The words hung in the air like smoke from a campfire, not quite real until the wind shifts and you feel the heat. Agent Redwing looked as surprised as I felt. "I beg your pardon?" Director Hawkins pulled out a tablet and scrolled through what looked like dozens of emails. "In the past 48 hours, my office has received over 3,000 letters, emails, and phone calls regarding your case. Local news picked up the story, then regional, then national. Social media has been enthusiastic in their support of your family." She turned the tablet toward us, showing a video that had been shared thousands of times. It was security footage from somewhere in town, looked like the feed from outside Murphy's General Store, showing Coda and Bandit sitting together on a bench while Shania shopped. Bandit was carefully handing Coda small objects from his pockets, and Coda was arranging them in patterns, both of them completely absorbed in their quiet game. "This video alone has been viewed over 2 million times, Director Hawkins continued. The hashtag #SaveBandit is trending nationally. I've had calls from senators, animal welfare organizations, and 3 different children's hospitals asking about your therapeutic methods." "I don't understand," I said. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that sometimes public pressure creates opportunities for creative solutions." She pulled out an official-looking document. "Dr. Blackfeather has submitted a proposal to register Bandit as a therapy animal under the Americans with Disabilities Act. If approved, he would be classified as essential medical equipment for your grandson's treatment." Coda looked up from his stones. "What does that mean?" Dr. Chenoa stepped forward, smiling. "It means Bandit would have legal protection as your emotional support animal. He could stay with you and your family permanently." "But he's still a wild raccoon," Agent Redwing said, clearly struggling with the implications. "The Lacey Act doesn't make exceptions for therapy animals." "Actually, it does," Director Hawkins said. There's a provision for animals deemed essential for medical treatment, provided they're under the care of licensed professionals and meet certain safety and health requirements. Shania emerged from the cabin, phone still pressed to her ear. When she saw the crowd on our porch, she ended her call quickly. "What's happening?" "They want to make Bandit legal," Coda announced, his voice filled with wonder. "It's not that simple," Director Hawkins cautioned. "There would be conditions. Extensive health monitoring, regular behavioral assessments, proper licensing and insurance. Mr. Whitehawk would need to work under Dr. Blackfeather's supervision since his veterinary license is suspended." "I can do that," Dr. Chenoa said immediately. "Ezra's forgotten more about animal behavior than most vets ever learn. It would be an honor to work with him." "And there's something else," Director Hawkins continued. "The Cherokee Nation has submitted a formal request to establish a wildlife therapy center on tribal land. They're offering your family the opportunity to run it with Bandit as the first resident therapy animal." The words hit me like a lightning bolt. A therapy center? For children with autism, PTSD, anxiety disorders, any condition that might benefit from animal-assisted therapy. You'd be working with kids like Coda, helping them heal the way he's been healing. Shania sat down heavily on the porch steps. "This is really happening?" "If you want it to happen," Director Hawkins said. "But I need an answer today." "The paperwork is complex, and there are people in Washington who would prefer this whole situation just disappear quietly." I looked at Coda, who was holding Bandit close to his chest, both of them watching me with hopeful eyes. Then I looked at Shania, who had tears streaming down her face but was smiling for the first time in years. "What do you think, baby girl?" For once, she didn't correct me about the nickname. "I think Mama would say we should follow our hearts." "And what's your heart telling you?" "That maybe this is why everything happened the way it did. Maybe Spirit brought Bandit to us because she knew we all needed each other. Maybe Mama guided us here because this is where we belong." Agent Redwing stepped forward, and I was surprised to see him smiling. "For what it's worth, Mr. Whitehawk, I think you're making the right choice. That boy and that raccoon. I've never seen anything like their connection." "There's one more thing," Dr. Chenoa said quietly. "The Cherokee Nation wants to name the center after your wife, the Ayanna Whitehawk Wildlife Therapy Center. They said anyone who could raise a daughter like Shania and inspire a man like you deserves to be remembered." That's when I lost it completely. 4 years of grief, guilt, and loneliness came pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. Shania was beside me in an instant, her arms around my shoulders, and Coda pressed against my other side with Bandit chittering soft comfort sounds. "It's okay, Daddy," Shania whispered. "It's all going to be okay now." "Your mama would be so proud," I managed to say through my tears. "Of you, of Coda, of all of this." "She is proud," Coda said, with the simple certainty that only children possess. "She told me so." "When did she tell you that?" "In my dreams. She said she sent Bandit to help us find each other again." Director Hawkins cleared her throat diplomatically. "So, Mr. Whitehawk, what's your decision?" I looked around at my family. My daughter, who'd forgiven me, my grandson who'd found his voice, and a small raccoon who'd somehow managed to heal wounds I thought would never stop bleeding. In the distance, I could see the old oak tree where Spirit lay buried, and I felt a peace settle over me that I hadn't experienced since Ayanna died. "Ma'am, I believe we'd be honored to accept your proposal." The paperwork took 3 hours to complete, but by sunset Bandit was officially registered as Coda's therapy animal, and I was the provisional director of a wildlife therapy center that didn't exist yet, but somehow felt more real than anything I'd done in years. As the government vehicles pulled away, leaving us alone on the porch in the gathering dusk, Coda looked up at me with those wise eyes. "Grandpa, what happens now?" "Now, little warrior, we build something beautiful. Something your great-grandmother would be proud of." "Will other kids get to meet raccoons like Bandit?" "If they need to, son, if they need to." And sitting there with my family whole again and a small raccoon curled up in my grandson's lap, I finally understood what Ayanna had been trying to tell me all along. Love doesn't end when people die. It just finds new ways to grow. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning that smelled of new beginnings and wild honeysuckle, I stood on the porch of what was now officially the Ayanna Whitehawk Wildlife Therapy Center and watched my grandson teach a group of children something I never thought possible: that healing comes in the most unexpected packages. The center had grown from a simple idea into something that felt like a miracle. What started as my old cabin had expanded into a proper facility with therapy rooms, outdoor enclosures, and a visitor center that stayed busy from dawn to dusk. We had raccoons, yes, but also foxes, owls, a three-legged coyote named Hope, and even a black bear cub, whose mother had been killed by poachers. Each animal had been rescued, rehabilitated, and chosen for their gentle temperament and therapeutic potential. But none of them had quite the magic that Bandit possessed. "Mr. Ezra," called out Emma Rodriguez, an 8-year-old from Knoxville, who hadn't spoken a word since witnessing her father's death in a car accident. She was sitting cross-legged on the grass with Bandit in her lap, carefully braiding dandelions into a crown. "Bandit says the flowers are for his mama." I walked over and knelt beside her, my old knees creaking like rusty hinges. "Is that what he told you?" "Uh-huh. He misses her, but he's not sad anymore because he knows she's watching." It still amazed me how these children, traumatized, withdrawn, sometimes nearly feral with pain, could communicate with our animals in ways that defied every textbook I'd ever read. Coda called it heart-talking, and I'd stopped trying to find a more scientific explanation. "Well, then we'd better make sure it's the prettiest crown we can manage," I said, helping her select the best dandelions. Across the yard, Shania was leading a group of parents through what we called understanding sessions, teaching them how to recognize the signs of healing in their children and how to support the therapeutic process at home. She'd left her job in Atlanta and moved back to Tennessee permanently, something I still couldn't quite believe was real. "Daddy, look at this," she called out, holding up her tablet. The screen showed our latest social media statistics. The #SaveBandit story had evolved into Healing with Bandit, and families from across the country were sharing videos of their children's progress. Dr. Chenoa emerged from the main building with Marcus Blackhorse, a 12-year-old Navajo boy whose selective mutism had baffled therapists for 3 years. He was carrying a small fox kit named Rusty, talking to the animal in soft, steady tones that his parents hadn't heard since before his trauma. "The application for federal funding came through, Doctor," Chenoa told me, unable to hide her excitement. "Full approval for a 5-year research grant studying animal-assisted therapy for childhood trauma. We're officially legitimate." "Legitimate or not, what we're doing here works," I said, watching Marcus whisper secrets to Rusty that he'd never trusted to human ears. "It works because you understand something most therapists miss," she replied. "Healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about finding new ways to be whole." That philosophy had become the unofficial motto of our center, carved into a wooden sign that Coda had helped me make from a piece of the old oak tree where Spirit was buried. Below her grave, we'd planted a memorial garden where children could sit quietly with the animals and remember their own lost loved ones. Grandpa! Coda's voice carried across the yard, bright with excitement. Come and see what Bandit's teaching Sarah. Sarah Mitchell was 6 years old and had been selectively mute since her mother died of cancer 2 years earlier. Her grandmother had driven 4 hours from Memphis every week for the past 2 months, hoping against hope that something might break through her granddaughter's protective silence. I found them by the pond, where Bandit was demonstrating his latest skill. He'd learned to stack smooth river stones into perfect cairns, balancing them with the delicate precision of a master architect. Sarah watched in fascination, then carefully began building her own tower beside his. "Like this, Bandit?" she whispered, her voice so soft I almost missed it. But her grandmother didn't miss it. Helen Mitchell collapsed onto the nearby bench, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as she heard her granddaughter speak for the first time in 24 months. "Did you hear that?" Helen gasped. "Oh, sweet Jesus, did you hear that?" Sarah looked up, startled by the commotion, then seemed to realize what had happened. Instead of retreating back into silence, she stood up and walked to her grandmother with quiet dignity. "I'm sorry I didn't talk to you before, Grandma. I just forgot how words worked. But Bandit reminded me." That evening, after the last families had gone home and we'd settled the animals for the night, our own little family gathered on the porch for our daily tradition. Shania made coffee, real coffee, not the swill I'd been drinking for years, while Coda updated his journal about each child's progress. I'd started requiring him to keep records, partly for research purposes, but mostly because I suspected he had a gift for this work that might take him far beyond these mountains someday. 13 new words from Emma today, he reported seriously. Marcus talked to Rusty for 47 minutes straight. And Sarah, he paused, grinning. "Sarah said she wants to be an animal doctor like you when she grows up, Grandpa." "Animal therapist," I corrected. "Different calling entirely." "What's the difference?" "Animal doctors fix bodies. Animal therapists help heal souls." Bandit climbed into his favorite spot on Coda's lap, chittering contentedly as my grandson scratched behind his ears. The little raccoon had grown into a magnificent adult, his intelligence and empathy seeming to increase daily. He'd become something of a celebrity, featured in National Geographic, studied by researchers from 3 universities, and beloved by children around the world. But to us, he was simply family. "Daddy," Shania said, settling into what had once been her mother's chair with her own cup of coffee, "I got a call from the Cherokee Nation today. They want to establish 3 more centers like this one in North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Montana. That's a big responsibility." "It is, but I think we're ready for it. I think this is what we're meant to do." I rocked back in my chair, listening to the evening sounds of our little community, the soft hoots of our resident screech owl, the gentle splashing of our pond waterfall, the distant laughter of late departing families. Through the kitchen window, I could see Ayana's photograph on the mantel, surrounded by pictures of the children we'd helped and letters from grateful families. "You know what your grandmother used to say about purpose?" I asked Coda. "What?" "She said purpose isn't something you find. It's something that finds you when you're ready to receive it." "Do you think she knew this would happen? That Bandit would come to us, and we'd end up helping all these kids?" "I think your grandmother knew that love never dies. It just changes shape. Maybe she sent spirit to us because she knew we all needed healing. Maybe this was always the plan." Shania reached over and took my hand. I love that story better than believing it was all just coincidence. Sometimes the best truth is the one that helps us sleep better at night, I said. As if summoned by our conversation, a new raccoon family emerged from the woods, a mother with 3 kits, moving cautiously toward the food stations we maintained for wild visitors. Bandit perked up immediately, chittering what sounded like a greeting. "New neighbors," Coda observed. "Looks like it. Wonder if any of them might have the calling for this work." "Only one way to find out." The mother raccoon approached the porch cautiously, her babies following in careful single file. When she reached the bottom step, she looked up at us with intelligent dark eyes that reminded me so much of spirit it took my breath away. Then she did something that made my heart skip a beat. She climbed the steps slowly and placed a small pine cone at my feet before backing away to a respectful distance. "Well, I'll be damned," I whispered. "Language, Grandpa," Coda said, but he was grinning. "What do you think it means?" Shania asked. I looked at the pine cone, then at the raccoon family, then at my own family gathered around me on this porch where everything had started with a desperate mother's trust. "I think it means we're going to need a bigger porch." As the stars came out over the Smoky Mountains and our extended family, both human and animal, settled in for another peaceful night, I felt Ayana's presence as clearly as if she were sitting in the chair beside Shania. Not supernatural, just the kind of love that transcends physical death and lives on in every life touched, every heart healed, every child who finds their voice again through the simple magic of unconditional acceptance. "Thank you, my love," I whispered to the night air, "for guiding us home." And somewhere in the darkness I could swear I heard her whisper back, "Family ain't just blood, Ezra. Sometimes it's who shows up when you need them most." The raccoon family settled down near the memorial garden, the babies playing quietly while their mother kept watch. Bandit chittered a soft good night from Coda's arms, and somewhere in the distance, a whippoorwill called out the promise of another day full of healing possibilities. Sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that bring you back to where you started, with new eyes to see the gifts that were waiting there all along. Friends, I want to share something with you that's been weighing on my heart. We've all reached that season of life where we've buried people we love, watched our children move away, and sometimes wondered if our best days are behind us. Maybe you're sitting in a house that feels too quiet, drinking coffee meant for two, or looking at grandchildren's photos on your phone instead of seeing them in person. Maybe you've made choices that your family couldn't understand, carried guilt that feels heavier than mountains, or wondered if anyone still needs what you have to offer. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes our greatest heartbreaks become doorways to our deepest purpose. Sometimes the very wounds that nearly destroyed us become the source of our ability to heal others. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up when you need them most. And love? Real love doesn't end when people die. It just finds new ways to grow, new hearts to touch, new lives to transform. Your story isn't over. Your capacity to love, to heal, to make a difference, that's not diminished by age or loss. It's refined by it, like gold tested by fire. The question isn't whether you have something valuable left to give. The question is, are you ready to receive the unexpected gifts life still wants to bring you? What unexpected blessing has appeared in your life during your most difficult season? Have you experienced a relationship that healed old family wounds? Share your story in the comments below. We need to hear it.